Much looking forward to this particular episode of the Writers of the Future podcast, because we're going to talk about specifically writing instructors and what works and what doesn't work. But before we get into that, your history with Writers of the Future, because you're the grand prize winner all the way back in volume 3. So I'm just curious how you found about the contest and your curve to actually winning it.
Yeah, well, I joined a little writing group at Brigham Young University when I was there, and it was all science fiction and fantasy writers. And I probably had been going for a month or so when one of the authors, M. Shane Bell, said, "Hey, I've heard about this really cool new writing contest." Volume 1 of Writers of the Future had just come out, and so we all sat around and looked at it and decided we ought to enter. And so we entered stories. M. Shane Bell ended up winning a first place. I ended up winning, I think, a finalist the first time that I entered. And then I decided I'd better get serious if I was going to beat Shane. And so I entered my next story, was On My Way to Paradise. And that's the one that won the grand prize. And within about 2 weeks of winning the grand prize, I ended up getting my first 3-book contract from Bantam Books.
Which is great. That was really, really great. So what makes Writers of the Future such an important aspect to the future of science fiction and fantasy?
Well, there's a lot of things going on with Writers of the Future that make it different. For one thing, one of the goals of the contest has always been to offer enough prize money to help make a difference in a writer's life. And so when I won my grand prize, of course, first thing I did was go out and buy a new computer so that I could write on it. And I also continued my writing education by buying books. And I stayed in college, of course. I was a senior in college at the time. And so there were a lot of benefits, but then there's also the publication that you get, the recognition that you get from publishers and from editors and literary agents. All of that factors into what makes this such a valuable contest, because you can win a small regional contest and it's not going to make a whole lot of difference. But if you win something big like this, everybody finds out about it.
Yeah. Plus, this contest has now grown so much that it's got entries from over 175 countries. And it's, we have winners every year from all over the world, which is just really, really great. And you get to see all the entries, and it's considerably more than it was in 1985 when the first call went out.
Yes, exactly.
Now, the contest was created by L. Ron Hubbard shortly following his having released Battlefield Earth. So how familiar were you with him at the time, or how familiar did you become with him as a result of the contest?
I wasn't real familiar with L. Ron Hubbard at the time. I remember that my parents had a Dianetics book, as I recall, growing up, and so I was familiar with the name. But he hadn't been writing science fiction and whatnot for a few years, and I was paying a lot of attention to who was winning awards at the time. I was looking at the Hugos and the Nebulas and stuff like that, and I was working back historically, reading a lot of novels back into the 1950s and that kind of thing. But I wasn't super familiar with him at the time.
Got it. And so then, once you found out about the contest and the fact that he had been one of the most popular writers of pulp fiction, anything about that once you started reading him that impressed you about his writing?
Well, one of the things that I looked at was just how do I say this? How businesslike he was. He knew how to